making sense common again. It's your host, David Knight.
Welcome back on this October the 24th, 2017. I'm David Knight, and we were just talking about Frederico Wilson. And it raises a lot of questions. It raises questions about politicization, and of course, they came back, and their only comment, you heard the comments that were made by Geraldo Rivera about how sincere and genuine and heartfelt what General Kelly said as he recalled what happens after a soldier is killed in battle. He went through all of that and then talked about this particular incident. And their only response was to come back and say, well, he'll do anything to keep his job. That's what she said. And other Democrats joined in there with her. I guess they will do anything to keep their job. So there is anybody that looks at the two of those people next to each other, and here's those two speak, and here's what they have to say. There's absolutely no question as to who has more credibility here. And what is happening to the Democrat Party? As you point out, they will do anything. They will politicize any event, and they will turn it into a race event in most cases. They will turn it into identity politics. Not just politicize it, but identity politicize it. That's what this is all about. And I have a story here from the Washington Times. Cuban refugee warns that Democrats against the communist movement that has hijacked their party. That's precisely what has happened. This is a guy who fled Cuba as a boy. He's warning Democrats against what he sees as ideological parallels between what he fled and the Democrat Party. He said balance is good, but the Democrat Party no longer exists. He said rational, middle-of-the-road Democrats have been hijacked by the leftist, socialist, communist movement. This guy is a Marine veteran. His name is Dagnesis, I think is the way you pronounce his name. I'm not sure. But he's a Marine vet who twice made an unsuccessful bid for the U.S. House in California's 26th congressional district. He said his family fled Cuba after Castro's rise to power. He said his adopted grandfather was a high-ranking member of the Revolutionary Party, but quickly fell out of favor with the regime. They had to escape to America, but it allowed his family to thrive coming to America despite having nothing. They came here with nothing. And I got to say, growing up in Florida, that was my experience. The people who came there as Cuban refugees, anybody who has escaped from Eastern Europe, anybody who has escaped from Castro, who has escaped from communism and socialism, they have a fire for freedom that you just don't find in Americans for the most part. Americans have been spoiled by the freedom that they've enjoyed. They've come to think of it as absolutely nothing. Americans have no more regard for freedom than a spoiled rich kid has for money. And it's really a sad thing. But the people who had it, who did not have it, I should say, these people who are coming from places like Cuba and Eastern Europe, they're like my parents' generation who were part of the Depression. That gave them an appreciation for money that a rich kid just doesn't have. And the people who came here from socialist, communist countries, like the Cubans that I knew, they really appreciated freedom, and they appreciated America where they could get that freedom. He said, only in America can you work hard and even have a third world, third grade dropout education. But if you work hard and you stay out of trouble, you'll still succeed. The sky is the limit. He said the presidential campaign of Bernie Sanders was useful because it brought the term socialist back into the mainstream political discourse. He said Sanders' popularity revealed that the Democrat Party at its root is a socialist one, even if it masquerades as the liberal party. And when we come back, I'm going to play you the response of college students who love the tax program as long as it was done by their Führer, to Bernie. But if they find out that that same tax program is actually Donald Trump's tax program, they freak out. That is the politics of personality, but it is also the ignorance of people who turn into useful idiots. That's how they deceive people to take away their freedom. That has always been the tactic of the communists and the socialists. I'm David Knight. We'll be right back. Welcome back on this Tuesday, October the 24th, 2017. In the last segment, I was talking about an individual who was a Cuban refugee. He'd run for Congress several times in California, but he was somebody who didn't like socialism. So you don't have much of a chance in California. One of the things that he said to the college students that he was addressing was he said he was grateful for the presidential campaign of Bernie Sanders because they took the mask off in terms of socialism. He came out, he identified as a socialist. And they've used so many different terms to try to hide what they really are. They've called themselves liberals. It used to be, and that's why people will still say, well, I don't call myself a libertarian. I call myself a classical liberal. Because liberals used to be people who were for liberty. They used to be for freedom, economic freedom, and social freedom and so forth, due process, individual rights. Those people called themselves liberals. Well, they stole that. They stole that. People who are authoritarian, people who want the government to control everything. They want the government to dictate everything. They want rules about everything. They want censorship, as we see. They want socialism, but they call themselves liberals because socialist had a bad connotation. It eventually became communism. As a matter of fact, Lenin said that. Lenin said the goal of socialism is communism. Everybody knew the two were linked together. And even if you go with Adolf Hitler, he called his fascist party the National Socialists. And he was just coming to the same end, the same goal as Stalin. He just was pursuing it in a different order than Joseph Stalin. Stalin confiscated everything to start with. And Hitler said, no. We're going to use them to gain power, to conquer, and then we will take their stuff. So he came up with a economic fascism, a crony capitalism, if you will. But the end goal of socialism is communism, according to Vladimir Lenin. So let's go with that. But at least now, Bernie Sanders was candid enough to call himself a socialist. So now the people who have hid behind the label of liberal, they hid behind the label of progressive, now they are owning, many of them, the term socialism. So that at least is a positive effect. But let's talk about what they do when they see a tax plan that has a different label. They presented some college students. This is a video that's on mrctv.org. They presented some college students with a tax plan that was actually Donald Trump's tax plan. The kids thought that it was Bernie's tax plan. Here's what their reaction.
This week, Donald Trump released his new tax plan, which was immediately shot down by his political opponents on the left. But what would those same people think if they were told that that tax plan was actually Bernie Sanders' plan? Today, we're at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. to find out. What were your thoughts on Trump's tax plan when you saw it?
It's better for the upper class than anyone else.
Pretty much horrible for the middle class, especially the lower class.
I mean, not ideal.
It's probably not the most efficient nor beneficial to the general populace.
Pretty negative.
They're repeating Democrat talking points.
So Bernie Sanders came out with his plan. Some people call it the compassionate alternative. So we're getting opinions on Bernie's plan. First, one of Bernie Sanders' plans is to enhance the child tax credit, which is tax money given back to families when they have children. What do you think of that? Positive or negative?
Positive.
All right.
Same. I was a social worker, so I understand how important tax credits like that are.
Parents that have children go through a lot, and I think giving back money to them really,
of course, this is actually Trump's idea.
I think that's positive, definitely. Positive.
He just told him it's Bernie's
Next
idea.
Up, eliminating the death tax. So when people die, it's a large tax on their estate that goes to their family. What do you think of that?
I think that's definitely something that we should be doing.
I do think that's a good idea because I'm from New Jersey. We used to have like a really heavy inheritance tax.
I'm in favor of that.
I would say more positive.
I think I agree with that.
Bernie is planning to lower the small business tax rate to a maximum of 25%. I think that's a positive or negative?
These people are really stupid. I think Bernie wants to lower any taxes.
Toward that. My family has a small business, so I would definitely think that's a positive thing.
Taxing them less makes more sense.
Any way we can help small businesses work and thrive, it's definitely something that's beneficial for the country.
I think that would be great.
Overall, main idea of the plan, what do you think? Bernie did a good job, bad job?
I think overall, good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, good job. Good job, Bernie.
I think it's definitely a good plan, a positive plan that can help everyone.
I think it's pretty good. Definitely better than whatever Trump is proposing. I would make that leap right there. So.
What if I told you this actually is Donald Trump's tax plan, not Bernie's?
You got me.
It is. It's Trump's plan.
Now I hate it.
All of these are actually Trump's ideas. This is actually Trump's plan.
Wow.
Wow, that's interesting.
Wow. I am shocked that I do agree with Trump on certain things.
Okay.
Interesting.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting.
I'm definitely
Crickets.
happily surprised that it's like sounds a lot better than I would have expected it to.
I would have imagined he would be a little more stupid than that.
Okay. So, but it's not a stupid plan?
No, actually, you're the
No,
one
I
who's
don't think
stupid.
so. I think if you said it was Trump, at least for many people, it would be more opposition to it just because it was Trump.
It could be a policy of giving me ice cream, but if it's Trump, I'd be like, what's in that ice cream?
I definitely think there's an initial bias. I mean, I've done it myself. Like, I'll just like hear the word Trump and I'm like, ugh. I definitely think that's something to like need to be like looked over.
People, once they hear Trump or like Republican, they become like, oh, they suck no matter what.
I think people definitely hear the name and start to think things automatically. And also because a lot of people just go to the same news sources, the same media.
Groupthink, tribalism. That's the way they train these kids. And we are all capable of falling into that, opposing something just because of the person who proposed it, discounting something because of the news outlet that reported it. Make sure you don't do that. Make sure that you don't make those same kind of mistakes. One of the girls there said, yeah, my family has a small business. That would be good. Small businesses need to survive and thrive. We need to get rid of that death tax that's there that causes most family or small businesses to have to liquidate in order to pay the tax bill. It'd be good to lower taxes on small businesses and so forth. But then that was when they didn't know that that was Donald Trump's idea. Bernie is never, no socialist is ever going to lower your taxes. That would give you freedom and control over your life. That is the antithesis of why they exist. They exist to take money and power and decisions away from you. That is the essence of socialism. The lie of group rights. There is no such thing as group rights, and we see this playing over and over again, not only in the Weinstein situation, but also what we saw in California, where they said, all right, we believe that HIV is something that affects the gay community, so we're going to remove the penalties for intentionally spreading it, and ignoring the individual rights of the gay people who are going to be infected with HIV intentionally. It was a deterrent to protect individual gays, but so that they can pretend that they are working for group rights, they're going to remove that. And we see the same thing happening with women's rights and the people not wanting to hold Harvey Weinstein responsible for this stuff. People like Hillary Clinton, who gives her predator husband a free pass as she parades around about women's rights and so forth. This is the idea. And that was a great video. It was by Campus Reform. They really got to the essence of what that is about. And as we look at these people who are always about anti-fascism, right? That's what the left on campus, they're the anti-fascist, the anti-fa. Well, here's some real fascist that nobody in the Western press wanted to talk about. This is a story from DC Clothesline. Tens of thousands of actual Nazis hold a march in the Ukraine, which is now a U.S.-funded U.S. puppet. And we have people like Senator John McCain and Vice President Joe Biden shown shaking hands with the people who lead that government, the individuals who led these marches. The largest neo-Nazi march in modern Ukrainian history was held last weekend, and yet nobody in Western mainstream media paid any attention to it. 20,000 neo-Nazi extremists chanting fascist slogans, brandishing torchlights, openly giving Nazi salutes as they praised genocide. But now we don't care about that because it's a U.S. government puppet, and it is supported by the people at the top, that bipartisan, useful idiots, the phony opposition. People like John McCain and Joe Biden support it, and nobody cares about the real Nazis. It's just the manufactured enemies of the anti-fa. Stay with us. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight. Welcome back. Well, do you remember when movies had high ideals? I still do. That's not what we see coming out of Hollywood right now. And as we talk about Weinstein Gate and other issues, now it is emerging throughout Europe. We have an interesting story here I'm going to tell you about right after I do a quick commercial here. It's on News Wars. The journalist who called Julian Assange a criminal over the claimed rapes is now facing pedophilia allegations himself. This is a Swedish media personality who is accused of grooming and raping young teens. So this is the guy who was trying to take down Julian Assange. And now we find out that he is himself a pedophile. And this is coming out of a social media campaign, #MeToo. Yeah, I don't think that was Me Too from the victim's perspective, but I guess he could also come in here. He could put Weinstein Gate, #MeToo, because now he has been exposed. So it's good that people are waking up to this. This is the last frontier. The pioneers of sexual depravity are now coming for your children, and they have been for quite some time. I guess the good news is that as we see this, and we were talking in an interview the other day to the man, Gabe Hoffman, who did an open secret, and he called it the Savile effect. Savile effect, sorry, I keep using the American pronunciation, about Jimmy Savile, and saying that once this all came out and he was finally exposed, after they broke that secrecy, you saw an explosion of people coming out and exposing it. Because it's like, if they're going to do it to somebody as powerful as Jimmy Savile, then maybe they will do it to this other person over here. And many of them were very powerful individuals. And so you had this explosion of this stuff erupting, and a lot of people being convicted of it, and then it kind of went away. And hopefully it went away not because they started covering it up again, but because people were intimidated because they believed that they would actually be punished for this. See, when the rich and powerful get away with this, and then the not quite as rich and powerful get away with something, then it has an effect of criminalizing the entire society. It's true of any institution. We've talked about it with police brutality in the past, and say, if you want to get something done about it, you got to say that it is everybody's problem. It's not just the problem of black people. All lives matter. And you got to say, we're going to do something collectively about this because it is affecting everybody collectively. And when you do that, you can actually make some change. But as we had Frank Serpico say, every institution has problems. They got bad individuals in it. So the question is, are you going to punish those individuals? Are you going to purge them out of the institution? Or are you going to allow them to stay? And if you allow them to stay, what you do is you corrupt that institution. Well, that is true of society in general. If you tolerate this kind of stuff because Hillary Clinton is doing it, or because Bill Clinton is doing it, or because Jimmy Savile is doing it, or Heath is doing it, then you have corrupted that society. And that is the only good news that we see right now, is that some of this stuff is being exposed. So we're going to get to that just one moment. Before we do, real quickly, I'll remind you of the sales we have at InfoWarsStore.com. That's what funds this program, what funds this operation. We still have, for a very limited time only, 50% off of Brain Force Plus and 30% off of Super Male Vitality, 50% off of Anthroplex, and we've started 2 new sales now, Silver Bullet and Winter Sun. Heavily discounted. You can get 50% off of Silver Bullet and Winter Sun right now. That's our new special that just started. Also, we have 10% off of Vitamin Mineral Fusion at checkout when you enter the code VITA10. That's VITA 10. Put that in to get 10% off our Vitamin Mineral Fusion drink. A great way to get essential vitamins and minerals without having to take a lot of pills. You can just put a great tasting, makes a great tasting drink mix, or you can mix whatever you want to make it taste good. Get 10% off at checkout, Vita 10, Vitamin Mineral Fusion Drink. All right, so let's take a look at this story that's breaking on newswars.com about this Swedish journalist who tried to come after Julian Assange. And I believe that that was a manufactured situation. The women there in that particular situation were not underage, but this individual, his name is Fredrik Virtanen. He hosts his own talk show on Swedish television. He is part of he's merged as they have been exposing people as part of the Me Too social media campaign. And one individual said, I was raped back in 2006 when I was 21. She said it was an older media man with power had sexually assaulted her. Finally, they get the information out. And then you have some other individuals come out. A 26-year-old woman said 10 years ago, that would be when she was 16, this individual, Virtanen, she said, was trying to force her to go to his apartment to drink alcohol despite only being 16. And then we have testimony that reportedly says that he also tried to rape a 19-year-old woman in the southern city of Eskilstuna 17 years ago. So this is starting to come out about that individual. And as we look at what is coming out with Weinstein. This article from Breitbart yesterday, the EU Parliament is an absolute hotbed of sexual harassment. Remember, we had Cynthia McKinney talking about the film An Open Secret, and we had Gabe Hoffman in. Everybody interviewed him on all three of the programs last week, and he has that movie free on Vimeo. You can find the links at Infowars.com if you can't find it on Vimeo, but take a look at that movie. It's very important to understand as a parent the tactics that pedophiles will take, what they will do to try to manipulate your kids. That's one of the most important things to find out about that. And also just to understand that this is a real problem. Normal people can't believe that other adults would do this kind of stuff. So you have to understand, yes, it really exists, and this is how they operate, and this is what I need to do to protect my child. And so Cynthia McKinney said, well, it's Hollywood now, but it's going to be Washington, D.C. Well, it's also going to be the EU. An investigation has revealed that the European Parliament is a hotbed of sexual harassment where senior MEPs feel that they can do whatever they want and prey on younger women. Meanwhile, in the seat of the EU, we now have this story out of the Daily Mail, a Belgian sex education website for 7-year-olds. Understand? For 7-year-olds. This is where all the transgender stuff is going. If they can tell these kids in kindergarten, you need to make up your mind about all these gender issues. They can't make those decisions at that age. That is child abuse. And it is setting up the idea that we are going to, that these kids can't consent to sex. We've always had statutory rape that happens before a certain age because we understand that adults are can easily manipulate younger children. This is a Belgian website, features highly explicit drawings. It's come under fire as children as young as 7 were recommended to view it. It illustrates explicit aspects of sex, ranging from various sexual positions and sex toys. They talk about oral sex to these kids as young as 7 years old, and it's being sold to them in the elementary schools. They say, well, this is meant for 15-year-olds. It's still not appropriate. They're doing it for primary schools, and the government says, one of the fathers said, well, I would call it perversity, but they say, well, I think we need to have a different program based on ages, one for 7-year-olds, one for 11 and 12, and this is exactly what we're trying to do. They're unrepentant about it, absolutely unrepentant about it. They don't take it any more seriously than Weinstein does when he goes to his sex rehab, but it is outright pedophilia being sold in the schools there and here. Welcome back. We're going to be talking to Eric Peters in this segment. Of course, Eric is someone that I've talked to multiple times before. He's an author. He writes columns. He has a website, epautos.com. He writes about cars, mobility, and liberty. And even if you're not interested in cars, you need to be interested in mobility and liberty. And he does it from a libertarian perspective. He doesn't talk about them necessarily being appliances or fashion statements, but about mobility and liberty. And because of that, even though he's been writing for 25 years, he is now no longer politically correct. And so here, as we're coming to the 100th anniversary of the October Revolution, October 1917, and we're looking at these same tactics to control people that we have seen for so long, things like political correctness. I wanted to get Eric Peters on because he starts out this article, Raising the Jolly Roger. And I'll just read to you from the opening paragraph he has. He says, most people don't know the term politically correct has its origins in Stalin's Soviet Union. Back then, it meant more than just excommunication from the party, or, I would add, being shamed by society into silence, right? It often meant that you would get an ice pick to the head. Well, it may come to that here as well. Of all things, of all places, the car business has now become hag-ridden by politically correct orthodoxies. And while the penalty for running afoul of these is not yet the North Korean thugs bashing in your skull, it is serious enough. So joining us now is Eric Peters. Eric, tell us, welcome, and tell us what is happening to you that you would write that about how they're punishing you for political correctness.
Well, thanks for having me back, Dave, first of all. And this whole business is just baffling and bewildering and depressing to me. As you know, I've been writing about cars for more than 20 years. And for more than 20 years, I've been getting regular access to all the car companies' press fleets to test drive their cars. Well, about a year ago, I came across an interesting story about General Motors having, of all things, a vice president for diversity. So I looked into this a little bit, and I wrote an article about it. And within 2 weeks of that article's appearance, I got cut off from GM's press fleet after 20-something years of getting them. And I contacted them to ask them why, and they were extraordinarily evasive, wouldn't give me any specific answers, just claimed that it was a business decision, and I continued to press them about it and pointed out the size of my readership, the size of my audience, and those are the metrics that they base loaning the cars to journalists on. You know, if you have if you've got a column that's read by several 100,000 people, if you work for a major newspaper, any form of media that's large, you get the cars.
And you've done stuff, let's just interject here, you've done stuff for the Wall Street Journal, for Chicago Tribune, Detroit News, Free Press, American Spectator, many others. You have your own website that gets a lot of traffic. So you're a bona fide car journalist. You've been doing this for 25 years. So why would they cut you off?
Well, then I looked into it a little bit more. And as it turns out, the individual that GM has hired to handle all of their interaction with media on the East Coast and probably nationally is a guy named Joe Lamaraglia, who is one of these SJW social warrior types whose background is the founder of gaywheels.com.
Well, I didn't know that gay people had different kinds of wheels than the rest of us.
Doesn't it make your teeth hurt? Now it's no longer about being a writer and about the quality of your work. It's whether you are a gay writer or whether you are an African American writer. There actually is a publication, if you can believe this, called African Americans on Wheels. So, my report is, well, how about Aryans and Audis, if you want to go down that road. And of course,
maybe they can rename GM and call it Gay Motors or something. I don't know.
So yes, there are all these orthodoxies now, and it's absurd and it's depressing because as we're just talking about, who buys a car based on their sexual proclivities or their race? I mean, a car you judge a car based on whether it appeals to you, whether it has the utility that you like, the performance that you like, whether it's at the price point that you like, things like that are irrespective of race. And the galling thing to me is, on the one hand, we're constantly urged that we're headed toward a society that's colorblind, in which people are judged as individuals based on their merits, based on all of those things. And at the same time, they've got all of these extremely race-specific and now sexual orientation-specific categories that you're supposed to genuflect before.
That's right. And if you don't, you are censored. And I'm looking at your article here, and you've got a picture of Jesse Jackson. Have it subtitled The Original Race Hustler. We just played earlier in the program another example of it. He's not only the original, but he is still, I would say, he's got to be the premier race hustler. Now, Frederica Wilson has given him a run for his money. But, he was out there saying that the NFL players were no different than the slaves picking cotton. He said they've just exchanged their cotton balls for picking up footballs, is what he was saying. These are people who paid millions of dollars to play this kids' sport, and he's talking about them being victimized.
Oh, and he's also threatening to boycott BMW because apparently BMW is not diverse enough. That's the catchphrase.
How is it not diverse enough? They got too many Bavarians in it?
Well,
and they need to make it black motors matter or whatever. It's
got something to do with proportionality, I guess, in terms of, well, you've got X percentage of African Americans in the general population, therefore that many BMW dealerships must be owned by African Americans in order for there to, not be the clear taint of racism.
Oh, wow. Keeping score by quotas again. Yeah. Man, that's amazing. Well, there was another article that you had that kind of went along the same line. It's not just General Motors who was doing this. And, of course, as you pointed out in this article, you went back and forth. You really couldn't get them to confess to it, could you?
No. I asked them, look, if it's a business decision, please tell me what your metrics are so that I can, do my best to meet them. If you have a specific number in mind in terms of the audience size and so on, fine, tell me what it is. And they wouldn't answer. And I know that they're full of beans because, again, I've been doing this for nearly 25 years now. I know a lot of people in this business. I've got a lot of colleagues in this business. And I know for a fact that they're continuing to give vehicles to people whose audiences are significantly smaller than mine. But, those guys, unfortunately, and I can't name them because they're friends of mine, and they work in the corporations. They work for corporate entities. And so they have to pull their punches. They have to fall into line. I'm independent, thank God. I went off the reservation, and I'm not constrained that way.
You know, I would periodically pick up the mainstream automotive press whenever I was in the market for a car. And other than that, I typically didn't read it all that much. But I have become an avid reader of mainstream automotive press because of what is coming in terms of automotive cars. And I see how they're cheerleading for all of this stuff. And it has real political consequences. Whether you like cars or not, they're going to take away your mobility and they're going to take away your liberty. And they're working on this. And you think, I like my car, I'm going to keep my car. No, you're not. They're going to set this down. They're going to shut down your freedom to move around. It is a war tactic. It has always been a war tactic. When they talk about the key objectives and strategies in war, it's to stop people from moving, communicating, and shooting. Well, you know, they're going to come after the movement. That is a big part of it. So I'm trying to sound the alarm for people to get them to understand how this is part of a larger agenda to keep people confined into cities, to limit their movement, to make them dependent on government for transportation, even within the cities. So that's why I look at the automotive press. And, you know, when you do your reviews, you're doing them from a liberty perspective. And I appreciate the articles. You have articles that are just simply about politics, and I guess that's one of the things that really offended them. But when I look at most of these guys, I think that, you know, they're getting advertising from the big car companies, so they will hold back in terms of their product criticisms. You can tell that they're holding back, and they're trying to put a happy face on something that in many cases is really a pig. And they're trying to do their best to do that. And so you understand they're not coming at you honestly. That's what I appreciate about your reviews at epautos.com. But it's also the fact that now they're doing it for this whole, you know, the god of autonomous vehicles. Yeah. That's what they're worshiping now more than any individual supplier. I'm going to get your comments on that when we come back, because one of the key individuals about that, of course, is Tesla. And you also have an article about why won't they send me a Tesla to test drive? I wonder why. We're going to be right back with Eric Peters. His site is epautos.com. Stay with us. I'm David Knight. That's right. How do we escape the political correctness that is pervasive in our society? I remember as a young child watching Dr. Zhivago. The love story, the affairs, all that stuff went straight over my head. I remember them taking his home. I remember the party taking his home. I remember when he complained about it. They said to him, "Comrade, you have been noticed." Well, our guest today, Eric Peters, has been noticed. He's been noticed by the gods of political correctness. He actually questioned, why does General Motors have a vice president in charge of diversity? What does that mean? As he points out, is African Americans on wheels any less noxious than Aryans in Audis or Jews in Jeeps? Do gay people base their car buying decisions on who they sleep with, or is it that they object to not having specifically gay people designing and selling them? Well, I'll tell you what I think this is about as we come back to Eric Peters. Before we do, real quickly, I want to tell you about the products that we sell here that support our operation, as Eric is trying to do car reviews, being boycotted by General Motors. He'll find a way to do it. I'm sure he will, and he's got great reviews. But we also have economic censorship being applied to us. Google and all the rest of these, Facebook, I haven't touched on that yet today, but Facebook is setting up a firewall for news organizations. They're trying to make it very difficult for people to share information. They're trying to intimidate people. Again, political correctness. Oh, we have determined, comrade, that news article is controversially fake. We have determined that somehow with our special powers. And if you say, I want to share it anyway, then they come up and say, you know, you could be sued for libel. And you could be liable to be liable. And so this is what they do. This is the process of intimidation we get from our Marxist masters. But what keeps us going, what keeps us independent, are the products that we sell. And so we've taken some of our most popular products and we put them on deep discount, like Brain Force Plus, 50% off. Super Male Vitality, 30% off. Anthroplex, 50% off. And we've just added 2 new popular products, Silver Bullet, that's our colloidal silver, as well as Winter Sun. Both Silver Bullet, colloidal silver, and Winter Sun, that's our vitamin D formula. It's a liquid formula. I take that every day. You can get those now 50% off. Some of my favorite supplements. And you can also get 10% off of Vitamin Mineral Fusion Drink. Great way to get your essential vitamins and minerals in an easy-to-swallow liquid format. And you can get that 10% off of Vitamin Mineral Fusion Drink at checkout when you enter the code VITA10. That's VITA VITA10. That's 10% off vitamin mineral fusion at checkout when you enter the code VITA10. You know, Eric, as I'm looking at this, I think that these people really don't care anymore about selling cars to individuals. I think that they're creating these kinds of positions because they are going to have one customer, and that's going to be the government. And so they want to toady up to whatever the political agenda of the government is. That's why they've got a vice president of diversity. What do you think?
I think that's certainly part of it. I'm actually working on an article that gets into another aspect of this, which is relevant and related to what we've been talking about as far as GM pulling my press car privileges. They moved their headquarters, if you can believe it, to Manhattan. I mean, can you think of a more car-unfriendly place than New York City?
Well, London, but yeah, not in the United States. I can't think of a more car-unfriendly place.
There was an interview the other day with Johan Denishin, who is the head of Cadillac division, and his thrust is that you won't buy the car, and this is his quote, you will experience the brand.
Yeah.
Now, what that means is you're going to rent the car. You will not, you will not own the vehicle. You will simply use it temporarily, and your credit card or your debit card will be hit for however long you drive it for a couple of hours. They done you for whatever the fee is. That's their new business model. That you're just going to have transportation as a service. That ownership will become a thing of the past.
And the governments are complicit in this. They want to see that happen because that will allow them to control transportation. They've tried everything they can with subways, with buses, with light rail systems. They're desperate to control our transportation. I can remember 25 years ago in Raleigh, I went to a meeting that the local city was doing, and she had just come back from Russia, and she was could not control her enthusiasm over being able to ride from one side of Moscow to the other and paying a nickel. Mm-hmm. And I said to her, well, it only costs you everything, all of your freedom and your money. You have no idea what the cost is. You saw the price of 5 cents, but you don't know what that truly cost you. And we're not going to put up with that here. Yep. And so that's what they want. They've been looking for a hook to make people dependent upon them. And they know that they can work in a private-public partnership. And they can create this kind of crony capitalism where with a combination of regulation and economic monopoly, they can control your movement and your transportation.
And they also see this as a new way to multiply their profits. If you run the numbers, if you do the math, if you buy a car, let's say, and your monthly payment is, let's just say $400. And that's all they're getting out of that one particular car. Now imagine if they put that car into a ride-sharing fleet and rented it out to various people 7 days a week, or even 5 days a week, and in the course of 30 days, they can multiply the revenue stream from the rental fees on that one car by 4 or 5-fold.
Yes,
that's what they're looking for, and it's a perk in addition to that they have utter control because you are no longer the owner. Therefore, you have no legal right to the car. The car will be controlled and programmed according to the corporation or the government. You are simply going to be using it, and it will become a privilege to use it.
That's right. That's right. Your movement will become a privilege. That's why I went back to the war on individuals, the war on individual rights. It's about moving, communicating, and shooting. They want to control your First and Second Amendment, but they also want to control your movement. And we don't even have a recognition of that in the Constitution. And we don't have a recognition of how vital that is in the public's mind. And as you're pointing out, they make more money if they lease a car than if they sell it. And they're going to make more money leasing it by the mile. And the government will be able to tax and to track every bit of your movement in that. So this is this kind of perverse partnership that we saw with Adolf Hitler. He said Stalin made a mistake because he took everything all at once. They're going to work with the corporations to enact this kind of corporate fascist control over our lives.
Yeah, and the sad thing is that the automotive media in particular is completely complicit. They amen and cheer all of this. The guys that I admired when I was young coming up, guys like Brock Yates and Chubachetta over Car and Driver, those guys got excommunicated years before I did. And now there's almost nobody in the automotive press any longer who challenges any of this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Because they all fall in line and they all worship Tesla. And you got an article, why won't Tesla send me a car to test drive? I think we know the answer to that. Tell us.
Well, the answer is that I would give it an honest test drive, and I would question some of the assumptions. For example, Elon Musk constantly touts the performance of his cars, that they're very quick. And I have no doubt that that's true. However, quickness is energy consumptive, and in a battery-powered vehicle in particular. So I think if you were to drive that car as appropriate for a car that costs $40,000 or $50,000, I think you would find that its advertised range is considerably less than advertised. I think you would also find that use of accessories, because remember, in an electric car, everything that's powered is powered by the batteries. That includes the air conditioning, that includes the heat. Think about how much heat or how much energy a space heater in a house uses, as an example.
Oh, yeah.
That's going to affect the battery range. And then you get into the issue of, well, if the range goes down, then I have to stop for a minimum of 30 to 45 minutes. Assuming I can find a fast charger, they call it that, it's hilarious, a fast charger, to wait for 30 to 45 minutes so that I can get on the road and maybe go another 100 miles or so.
Yeah, in that case, a fast charger is kind of like when they call something smart, right? A smart car or whatever. It's not too smart. That's why they have to tell you it's smart or fast.
It's Orwellian double-thinking language, the Patriot Act. It means the exact opposite of what they're telling us.
That's right. Yeah, well, I found it interesting because on the same day that we see this story about 80,000-pound trucks tailgating each other, and soon it will be perfectly normal and safe. That's the headline from the Washington Post. It'll be safe. Why will it be safe? Because the government will tell you that it's safe. On the same day that came out, they had a recall from Ford, 1.5 million, 1.3 million vehicles, F-150s and Super Duty vehicles or whatever, they have door problems that can fly open or be able to get them charged. And it's like, we are a long ways from getting autonomous cars when they can't get doors that won't fly open on the road, right?
Yeah, the only way that this could even conceivably work would be if you were to impose FAA-style protocols as they have for commercial airplanes. They have to go in for routine and incredibly comprehensive inspections and maintenance and upkeep. Now, that might work for commercial aviation, where you're dealing with, a few thousand airplanes nationwide, perhaps. Now, how many cars are on the road?
Oh, yeah.
And imagine that, and imagine the cost that would be involved. It's simply, it's economic madness. And to get back to where we were before, I don't think the people behind this are dumb. I think they're well aware that it's economic madness. I think they know
exactly what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. It is a technique for control, and it is a partnership between the big, giant corporations and the government to take away your freedom, to take away your movement. Thank you for joining us. Eric Peters, a great site, epautos.com, for honest information about mobility and liberty and cars as well. epautos.com.